So you then chose to make a film about the Kennedy assassination as your second film. What led you into this project?
Well, Mark Lane and I together became involved in the film on Kennedy. Kennedy was a classmate of mine at Harvard. I don't feel sentimental about my classmates, but I thought that Kennedy was an important president, and I think he had an agenda that had to be stopped. And this is why we made the film, because we did not believe the Warren report, and we thought somebody other than Lee Harvey Oswald killed John Fitzgerald Kennedy, or at least that if Lee Harvey Oswald had a role, it was a minor role. To begin with, Lee Harvey Oswald was a poor shot. In the second place, we now have so many facts and so much proof about other people who were in Dallas that day who had a real commitment to the killing of Kennedy. And then there's the political aspect of John F. Kennedy himself. Kennedy had alienated a good many people, although he didn't do very much, but he spoke, and he spoke very convincingly about changing things in regard to civil rights. This alienated a certain portion of the population, but most importantly, he alienated the CIA, because he did stop the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, and it is my belief that he was getting ready to pull out of our tiny, at that point, tiny presence in Vietnam. He had already withdrawn 1,000 troops, and he didn't think the war was winnable, and so he wasn't essentially an idealist, but a pragmatist. And pragmatic people are generally wiser than ideologues, like the right-wing lunatics who wanted the war in Vietnam. And so he had to be killed, just as his brother had to be killed.
The most striking thing in looking at the film today is the amount of witnesses that you compiled interviews with who claimed that they saw gunshots or heard gunshots or gun smoke or movements in this grassy knoll on this fence, which was very close to the passage on the freeway where Kennedy drove past. Witness after witness confirmed that they think that that's where the gunshot came from. How were you able to get these people on film, and why didn't the Warren Commission go after them to the extent that you did?
What the Warren report and commission failed to do makes you feel not only that it was flawed, but that there must have been something else afoot, because we found witnesses, simple Texas working people, honest people who had no axe to grind, who were on top of the overpass. Kennedy was being driven down toward them. They saw what happened as well as anybody. There were 5 of them there. The Warren Commission interviewed S.M. Holland first. He was the foreman of these 5 people. And his testimony was so amazing, in which he said he believed that shots came from the grassy knoll, did not come from the book depository building, that there was more than one shooter, that there were not 3 shots but 4 shots. The Warren Commission did not want that testimony, so it took a little bit of the next man and none of the other 3.
What was your position with the railroad company?
Track and signal supervisor for the Union Terminal Railroad. I've put in 41 years of railroad service in the signal department.
Did you look in any particular direction when you heard the shots?
Yes. I looked over to where I thought the shot came from, and I saw a puff of smoke still lingering underneath the trees in front of the wooden fence. The report sounded like it came from behind the wooden fence. And a policeman throwed his motorcycle down in the middle of the street and run up the embankment with his pistol drawn. He was running toward that particular spot. And also another motorcycle policeman right behind him tried to ride up the embankment on his motorcycle, and it turned over about halfway up the embankment. And he got out, got off his motorcycle and left it laying there and run on over to the fence with his gun in his hand.
Where do you think the shots came from?
Well, I know where that third shot came from.
Where did that shot come from?
Behind the picket fence.
Is there any...
Close to the little plaza.
Is there any doubt in your mind that that shot came from behind the fence?
There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt whatsoever in my mind in the statement that I made in the sheriff's office immediately after the shooting, and the statement that I made to the Warren Commission. And I made it very plain there was no doubt in my mind. But there was definitely a shot fired from behind that picket fence.
Is this where you were sitting on November 22nd, Mr. Price?
Yes, sir.
Right here?
Right here on this spot.
And where did you think you heard the shots come from?
From behind the overpass over there, triple overpass. That's where I thought the shots were coming from.
And where did you see the man run?
Over behind that wooden fence, past the cars, and over behind the Texas Depository Building.
Did you give that information to the Dallas Sheriff's Department on the very day of the assassination?
Yes, I did. I'd say in about 30 minutes after the assassination.
Were you ever called as a witness by the Warren Commission?
No, sir. No, sir.
I show you this map published by the Warren Commission of the Dealey Plaza area and ask you if you would mark on it where you thought the shots came from.
Yes, sir.
That's just behind the wooden fence where it joins the overpass. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We're now here more than 2 years after the assassination. Now, where do you think the shots came from on November 22nd?
Well, I can't be sure. It seems that from all information that's been gathered that the shots came from the Texas Boat Depository, but I can't hardly believe that. Although I never did look over there at the building, but really I think the shots came from that direction. Seems that everything pointed to that fact that they came from the Book Depository building, but I can't buy that right now. That's about it.
At the time the shots were fired, did you look at the Book Depository building?
No.
Did you think at that time that the shots came from the Book Depository building?
No, I thought it came from a fence between the Book Depository and the railroad track.
Did anyone else who you know, or who you've spoken with, also believe that the shots came from there?
Most everyone thought it came from the fence behind the Book Depository.
Did you have occasion to speak with Forrest Sorrells, who was, of course, a friend of yours, and the Secret Service agent in charge of Dallas that day?
Yes, I did.
Did he tell you where he thought the shots came from?
He thought they were coming from the same place.
Which is?
Behind the fence.
At the present time, where do you believe the shots came from?
Well, they came from the Book Depository because there's proof that it did come from there.
I see. This you've read in newspapers and you've read the report?
Yes. I believe the Warren report.
I would say that he was possibly 30 feet away when the first bullet struck, moved a little closer, and was possibly 20 to 25 feet away when the second bullet hit.
Did you see the effect of the bullets upon the president?
When the second bullet hit, there was the hair seemed to go flying. It was very definite then that he was struck in the head with the second bullet. And yes, sir, I very definitely saw effects of the second bullet.
Did you see any particles of the president's skull fly when the bullet struck him in the head?
I saw a piece fly over, in the area of the curb where I was standing.
And in which direction did that fly?
It seemed to have come left and back.
In other words, the skull particle flew to the left and to the rear of the presidential limousine.
Sir, whatever it was that I saw did fall both in that direction and over into the curb there.
You were a ranger during the war, correct?
Yes, sir, I was a ranger during the war. Took part in the invasion of France and was shot a couple of times. So, as I say, it's possibly like swimming. I hadn't heard that sound for many a year, but you don't forget it once you've heard a shot rounding, coming close to you.
Did you speak with newsmen on November 22nd and tell them what you saw?
Yes, sir, and told them simply that their 2 shots had hit the president and the direction that I had thought the bullets had come from.
Did you at any time that day make a statement which was televised?
Yes, sir.
Fortunately, I was probably 15 to 20 feet away from the president when it happened to him.
Tell us exactly what you saw, sir.
He was coming down the street, and my 5-year-old boy and myself were by ourselves on the grass there on Palmer Street, and I asked Joe to wave to him, and Joe waved, and I waved, and the man...
That's all right, sir.
You were... As he was waving back, he was... The shot rang out, and he slumped down in the seat, and his wife reached up toward him, and as he was slumping down, and the second shot went off, and it just knocked him down from the seat. I'm positive it had hit him. I hope it didn't, but I'm positive that it hit him, and he went all the way down in the car. Then they speeded up, and I didn't know what was going on, so I just grabbed the boy and fell on him in hopes that there wasn't a maniac around. I'm sorry. I can't help you more, but I won't forget it.
Did you make a statement to the Dallas Sheriff's Office?
Yes, I did.
How long did you remain in the Dallas Sheriff's Office that day?
I would say about 3 hours to 4 hours.
Were you among the closest witnesses to the limousine when the shot struck the president?
Yes, sir, I would have to say that, if not the closest, one of the closest to the unfortunate incident. I did get a view of something I'll never forget.
Were you called as a witness by the Warren Commission?
No, I was not called by the Warren Commission to testify.
In effect, Mr. Holland, the Warren Commission published just a very small portion of your testimony and used your testimony as proof that no shots could have come from behind the fence. Did they accurately and fairly use your testimony?
They are wrong, because my testimony, and I made it very clear, that there was a 4th shot fired, and one of those shots came from behind that picket fence. And there's no doubt in my mind, and never will be, because I was on the spot. I saw the smoke, heard the report, and saw the smoke from behind that fence. And I don't see how that they could doubt there was a 4th shot fired.
The vast majority of the witnesses who expressed an opinion as to the origin of the shots agreed with Mr. Holland that the shot did come from behind the fence. These witnesses, as this picture shows, were positioned throughout Dealey Plaza. The commission concluded that no credible evidence suggests that the shots were fired from any place other than the Texas School Book Depository building.
Mr. Holland, you were on the overpass. You were probably in the best position of any witness on November 22nd. In your view, did the Warren Commission present all of the facts regarding the assassination of President Kennedy?
Well, let me say this. The Warren Commission, I think, had to report in their book what they wanted the world to believe when they read the Warren Commission. As you know, as well as I know, that everybody everybody in the world was reading this Warren Commission, and it had to read like they wanted it to read. They had to prove that Oswald did it alone.
Page 71, Warren Commission report. In contrast to the testimony of the witnesses who heard and observed shots fired from the depository, the Commission's investigation has disclosed no credible evidence that any shots were fired from anywhere else. Page 61, Warren Commission report. No credible evidence suggests that the shots were fired from the railroad bridge over the Triple Underpass, the nearby railroad yards, or any place other than the Texas School Book Depository building.
Nobody ever asked, who the hell was Ruby? Why was Ruby, who was a pimp, who ran a cheap nightclub, who was a drug dealer, why did he feel that it was his patriotic duty to kill Oswald? And then when Earl Warren came with other members of the Warren Report and they talked to Ruby in his cell, Ruby said, Mr. Chief Justice, take me out of this cell, take me to Washington and I'll tell you the truth. This clearly implied he had not told the truth. And then Ruby died of cancer 6 months later. Now, doesn't it seem reasonable to think that somebody put Ruby up? I mean, this is an assumption that had to be examined. I'm not saying it's the truth, but it had to be examined and weighed carefully and considered. Isn't it at least reasonably possible that Jack Ruby was said by one of his bosses, look, you've got terminal cancer. Go in and kill this son of a bitch, and you'll be comfortable in jail, and you'll die, and you're going to die anyway. I mean, something like that. Maybe he said it more kindly than I've put it, but it could have been something like that. It was something the Warren Report, had it been efficient and honest, would have brought up, questioned, weighed, and then thrown out if they could prove it was not. They left too many strings lying around.
Were you employed by Jack Ruby?
Yes, I was. This was in 1961 in Dallas at his club, the Carousel, and I was bartender, waitress, and rather the manager there.
How did you get that job?
I had gone into Dallas not knowing anyone, and of course the first place I went was the police department. And they were very kind and got me the job there.
They got you the job at Jack Ruby's
Yes, they did.
Did they know Ruby?
Personally, oh yes, very well. Vouched for him. Wonderful person, great man. Well known by the Dallas Police Department.
What were your duties there?
Well, general bar duties, such as setting up the liquor, getting the bar ready for the evening trade, waiting tables if he was short-handed. Otherwise, I'd be behind the bar serving the drinks.
Did you ever serve drinks to Dallas police officers?
Oh, yes. In fact, the Dallas police officers were the special boys, shall we say. We even had a private stock for them.
Private stock?
Oh, yes. They wouldn't, bar liquor wasn't for them. We had names such as Hagen Haig or Black Label. The very, very high-priced drinks on the house, of course. You'd never, and that was a gross oversight if you ever charged a Dallas police officer or any official of the city of Dallas or Tarrant County.
Well, other than the Dallas police officers, what officials did frequent Ruby's establishment?
Oh, such as your district attorney, which would be Mr. Wade.
Did you receive any specific instructions from Jack Ruby about serving drinks for the Dallas police officers?
Yes, in fact, Jack told me point blank. He said, Nancy, if you ever, he said intentionally or unintentionally, charge a Dallas police officer, he said, you might as well go look for another job. He said, don't offend them, cater to them, talk with them, even if you ignore the other customers. Bend over backwards to be nice to them.
Did Ruby perform any other favors for the Dallas police officers?
Well, yeah, well, favors, we call them favors, I suppose so. He provided girls, gambling, and booze.
How many Dallas police officers would you estimate Jack Ruby knew on a personal basis?
At least half and probably two-thirds.
There were almost 1,200 police officers in Dallas in 1963. Would you say Ruby knew 600 of them?
Oh, easily.
A great deal has been written about the relationship of the Dallas Police Department with Jack Ruby. We have 1,200 men in our department, and we had each man to submit a report regarding his knowledge or acquaintance with Jack Ruby. Less than 50 men even knew Jack Ruby.
Did you see police officers drop into the Vegas club during the 6 years you worked there?
Oh, very definitely. They would come in there all the time, off duty, on duty, and so forth. And
How were they treated?
they were treated royally.
You testified before the Warren Commission, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Did they ask you how many police officers Jack Ruby knew?
No, they didn't ask me that question.
I've just read your testimony, and as I recall, they asked you one question about a police officer. They asked you if you knew a policeman named Harry Olson. You said you didn't remember the name.
That name didn't register with me.
But that was the only question they asked you about policemen.
About policemen, yes. They asked me numerous questions, but nothing about police other than that one that you just named.
Now, the other thing, can you believe this? Could anybody in his right mind believe this? That all the material they took in the interviews with Oswald, Chief Fritz, Chief Investigative Officer of the Dallas Police, Chief Curry, the chief in charge of the whole police department, they had no notes, no record of any notes. Now, here you're interrogating, if he's guilty, the most important criminal in modern times, the most important criminal since the assassination of Lincoln, at any rate. And they don't keep any notes? I mean, you know, that isn't feasible. I mean, it makes the whole... See, any place where you touch the Warren report, or what the police did, wherever you touch it with a probing finger, you knock it out. I mean, could anybody believe, ask any honest cop, ask any military policeman, ask anybody who's ever run a courts-martial or a judge who's run a trial, that if police have interrogated a guy for 8 hours and who has killed the President of the United States,
right,
there'd be no notes? Those two people should have been fired. Instead, they stayed on the force until they retired.
Dee, the main point of your film, Rush to Judgment, was to raise questions concerning the Warren Commission's theory that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone assassin. You punctured many different holes in this theory, but you didn't really offer an alternative hypothesis. At this point in time, many years later, do you have some ideas about who you think might have been involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy?
Well, this is probably better informed than the Warren report was, but I never pursued it. I never did a lot of work on it because I went on to make other films. I mean, I covered what I had to cover in the film Rush to Judgment, but I'm convinced that it was a combination of Cubans and CIA people. Cubans under the direction of CIA people. Cuban veterans of the Bay of Pigs.
The Cuban exiles, not
Cuban exiles,
not citizens.
not Cubans living in Cuba today or then, but the same exiles who attempted to overthrow Castro in the Bay of Pigs operation, which Kennedy halted, you know. Those people believe to this day that if he had put up the B-26s and bombed the beaches, and if he had used more naval cover, that they would have won. And it was at the last minute that he called off the B-26 strikes. And those people hated John F. Kennedy with a passion, and they hate him to this day, even though he's dead. And it's absolutely my belief that they, with the CIA officers who ran them together, were responsible for the death of Kennedy.
Do you think the mob had any role? Jack Ruby obviously had mob connections. He seemed to be part of a conspiracy plot.
Well, I hope you don't think this is a light joke, but it's my feeling you have enough people at the ball without the mafia. I mean, it's possible that the mafia was involved, and it's possible that the mafia may even supplied weapons or something, but you have too many people there, and most of the evidence that points... There's a woman that Lane found long after we made the film who had been the mistress of Castro and then became an anti-Castro person and was involved with the Cuban community. And she talks of making a trip to Dallas with a Cuban guy who was involved with the CIA, even in Watergate. And Lane says before the court, and he won this case, by the way, Lane did, what was in the car besides you people? And he said, she said, the trunk was full of high-powered rifles.
That was Marita Lorenz, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's, why didn't if Lane could find that person,
yeah.
why, if a civil lawyer can find that person, where was the FBI? Where were the investigators in the Warren Commission?
Lane also alleged that E. Howard Hunt, who later turned up in Watergate and who had involvement with CIA and these right-wing Cubans, was also present in Dallas that day.
That's absolutely true. So was Richard Nixon present in Dallas that day, but nobody thinks he had anything to do with the death of Kennedy. That's something quite different. But Howard Hunt was there,
right.
And Howard Hunt had lied about that,
right.
And he lied in court about it. And this case ended only 3 years ago.
Well, didn't Marita Lorenz say that the caravan carrying rifles that she was in was met in Dallas by Hunt, and he was the one who received them and then paid them off?
She did say that. But that was in Spotlight.
Right.
And Spotlight is not a paper, is not the New York Times. I try to be as conservative as possible, which is why I didn't bring that up. You brought it up, which I'm glad you did, because I frankly believe it. But, it doesn't have the same evidentiary weight that the New York Times has, or the fact that Hunt lost a case in which he lied about where he was.
Comes Oswald down the hall again.
You buy that rifle? What dispatches you people have been given, but I emphatically deny these charges.
Oswald is hustled through a doorway.
Had he told anyone he planned to kill the president?
He hasn't admitted killing the president to anyone.
You have any reason to believe that there was any organization behind him?
How is it he says it has not been mentioned to him?
Well, I don't know what he said. He says he didn't do it. We're still working on the evidence. This has been a joint effort by the Secret Service, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Dallas Police Department, the Dallas Sheriff's Office, my office, and Captain Will Fritz has been in charge of it.
How would you describe his mood during the questioning?
Very arrogant. Has been all along.
What does Jones say, Chief?
He just denies everything.
How do you sum him up as a man, based on your experience with criminal types?
Oh, I think it's a man that planned this murder weeks or months ago and has laid his plans carefully and carried them out and has planned at that time what he's going to tell the police that are questioning him at present.
What was his motive?
He didn't give any motive since he denies them both.
It's one of the great mysteries. And the Warren Commission that belongs to the garbage can of history, and so does the Warren Report. And what will go on is, more and more people die, so there's less and less evidence, but people will go on asking that question as long as people ask questions.
I would love to see a computer faced with the problem of coming up with the probabilities of the assassination taking place the way it did, with all of these strange incidents that took place before and are continuing to take place after the assassination. I think all of us who love this country should be alerted that something is wrong in the land.
And that's Alternative Views for this time. Frequently hear from viewers who request a list of news publications, which we use on Alternative Views, and also a reading list for U.S. power structure in the mass media. If you would like to have these, send a stamped, self-addressed envelope to the Alternative Information Network, P.O. Box 7279, Austin, Texas 78713. You must send a self-addressed stamped envelope. We'd like to thank our crew for helping with the program: Brian Lynch, Sue Kim, Roger Nussenblatt, Maria Lopez, Catherine Galatera, and Rosalind Peacock. And we are most appreciative of Lisa Ann Henderson, who gathered all the material and edited it up on this 4-part series on Emile de Antonio. Alternative Views is a production of the Alternative Information Network, P.O. Box 7279, Austin, Texas 78713. Goodbye.